All right. Let's get back to world building, campaign building. We're looking at in my world, or in this case, in your world. What are the rules? Which type of fantasy world is it? By genre, subgenre? Which type of magic system exists? Hard or soft? Are there other things that can be brought up as well? So we're in Chapter 9 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is page 263 if you're playing along at home. Because in the DMG itself, it brings up options for you to try. It does urge some temperance, some consideration, but let's read through ways that you can... how can you present D&D differently than the arguably, soft, easy approach that is in the player's handbook, where all spells are allowed, all classes, subclasses, races, sub-races, feats and multi-classings allowed, and so on and so forth, all right? All right, how about some ability options? Proficiency dice. This optional rule replaces a character's proficiency bonus with a proficiency die, adding more randomness to the game and making proficiency a less reliable indicator of mastery. Instead of adding a proficiency bonus to an ability check, an attack roll, or saving throw, the character's player rolls a die. The proficiency die table shows which die or dice to roll as determined by the character's level. Whenever a feature, such as the rogue's expertise, lets a character double his or her proficiency bonus, the player rolls the character's proficiency die twice instead of once. This option is intended for player characters and non-player characters who have levels, as opposed to monsters who don't. So, this is one thing you can swap out. You need to ask yourself, would this make my presentation, my world, more enjoyable to be in? Remember, what are the two questions? Will the rule improve the game, and will my players like it? If you have a bunch of click-clack, math rock, dice goblins, or dice dragons, they might want more randomness. They might want to roll more dice. People who want, we didn't touch on character creation options. Rolling dice, point buy, or a standard array. So there's other options in the player's handbook, the PHB, the PHUBA. But if people really enjoy rolling stats and they're okay with not having statistically higher than average results, they might like proficiency die instead of static numbers. Skill variance. A skill dictates the circumstance under which a character can add his or her proficiency bonus to an ability check. Skills define those circumstances by referring to different aspects of the 6 ability scores. For example, acrobatics and stealth are 2 different aspects of dexterity, and a character can specialize in either or both. You can dispense with skills and use one of the following variants. Choose whichever one best suits your campaign. Ability check proficiency. With this variant rule, characters don't have skill proficiencies. Instead, each character has proficiency in 2 abilities, one tied to the character's class and one tied to the character's background. The ability proficiencies by class table suggest a proficiency for each class, and you choose which ability is tied to a given background. Starting at first level, a character adds his or her proficiency bonus to any ability check tied to one or the other of these 2 abilities. And if this works, if this mixes it up because everyone at your table is bored in out-of-character terms, remember, we looked at stats for players out of character, just as we looked for in-game stats for race and class mixes, things along those lines. Would building your character this way And as the DM, you have the responsibility to enforce this. You know that if your players are the only ones abiding by this, and you run everything else by the book, which might be more consistent with results, be careful about that. All right. But if the players understand, okay, so I could be going up against an enemy thief or an enemy barbarian. That barbarian might have, well, they are playing by the same rules I am. Okay, I think I can live with that. It's a little scarier, but it's also still going to be fairly enforced. Okay, there we are. The expertise feature works differently than normal under this rule. At first level, instead of choosing 2 skill proficiencies, a character with the expertise class feature chooses one of these abilities in which he or she has proficiency. Selecting an ability counts as 2 of the character's expertise choices. If the character would gain an additional skill proficiency, that character instead selects another ability check in which to gain proficiency. This option removes skills from the game and doesn't allow for much distinction among characters. For example, a character can't choose to emphasize persuasion or intimidation. He or she is equally adept at both. If this helps you and your players tell a compelling story or remove particular distractions from the table, this is a good tool to use. What about background proficiency? With this variant rule, characters don't have skill or tool proficiencies. Anything that would grant the character a skill or tool proficiency provides no benefit. Instead, a character can add his or her proficiency bonus to any ability check to which the character's prior training and experience, reflected in the character's background, reasonably applies. The DM is the ultimate judge of whether the character's background applies. For example, the player of a character with the noble background could reasonably argue that the proficiency bonus should apply to a charisma check the character makes to secure an audience with the king. The player should be encouraged to explain in specific terms how the character's background applies, not simply, I'm a noble, but I spent 3 years before starting my adventure career serving as my family's ambassador to the court. And this sort of thing is second nature to me now. And if you're going, oh, wait a minute, that sounds a lot like what Daggerheart does. Uh-huh. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you are a DM, or even if you're a player who's tired of the, everything is dictated to you by the player's handbook, and every bard is the same bard, blah, blah, blah. Something like this is a way to still have a compelling character. It shifts the focus onto the character more, and you're still good at things. And you're super good at the things that are a part of you. Now, in our workshops that we've conducted in D&D character building, we've reflected this, that we've stuck with the text, though we discuss the character's background. We discuss a lot of this in a way that would then reflect what is being taken from the other options that are listed and why. It distills this rule, but puts it into vanilla D&D. Oh, is that what's happened this whole time? This system relies heavily on players developing their characters' histories. Don't let it result in endless debates about whether a character's proficiency bonus applies in a given situation. Unless a player's attempt to explain the relevance of the character's background makes everyone else at the table roll their eyes at its absurdity, go ahead and reward the player for making the effort. If a character has the expertise feature, instead of choosing skills and tools to gain the benefit of that feature, The player defines aspects of his or her background to which the benefit applies. Continuing the noble example, the player might decide to apply expertise to, quote, situations where courtly manners and etiquette are paramount, and, quote, end quote, and, quote, figuring out the secret plots that court members hatch against one another, end quote. Hi, Demon Quiller. This is the Dungeon Master's Guide. And also, hello, Urians. What about personality trait proficiency? With this variant rule, characters don't have skill proficiencies. Instead, a character can add his or her proficiency bonus to any ability check directly related to the character's positive personality traits. For example, a character with a positive personality trait of, quote, I never have a plan, but I'm great at making things up as I go along, might apply the bonus when engaging in some off-the-cuff deception to get out of a tight spot. A player should come up with at least 4 positive personality traits when creating a character. Wait a minute. Ideal, bond, flaw, and 2 personality traits. Although if we take the flaw away, that's 4. Wait a minute. It's been there the whole time? Bat Espada, we'll get to honor and sanity in, that's next. Man, why does that Matt character keep talking about how awesome backgrounds are in 5th Ed D&D? I never use my background. It's a throwaway thing to get 2 skills and maybe some tools. Says a straw man. Says an effigy character. I'm not saying any of you have ever thought that. Maybe some of you have. Man, why does... Yeah, Bane says, and a language. I think we have an emote for that. Hang on. No, that's not it. You're making me look this up. Hang on a second. I thought I had... yeah. Oh, it's a lowercase a. Yeah. There we go. A picture of Bane in real time, everyone. If all of you have ever wondered why when I'm presenting vanilla Dungeons and Dragons, why does he keep placing so much emphasis on the character's background? Why does he keep talking about it when building the character and not just exploiting it for a couple mechanical benefits? When a character's negative personality trait directly impacts an ability check, the character has disadvantage on the check. For example, a hermit whose negative trait is, I often get lost in my own thoughts and contemplation, oblivious to my surroundings, might have disadvantage on an ability check made to notice creatures sneaking up. If a character has the expertise feature, the player can apply its benefit to personality traits related to ability checks instead of skills, to skills or tools. If a character would gain a new skill or tool proficiency, the character instead gains a new positive personality trait. This system relies heavily on players developing their characters' personalities. Make sure that different characters' traits, positive and negative, come into play with about the same frequency. Don't let a player get away with a positive trait that always seems to apply and a negative trait that never does. At your discretion, you can also tie a character's ideals, bonds, and flaws into this system. The DM, and we use it for content fodder as well. Backgrounds, this is anecdotal. This is hashtag just me. Backgrounds are so important in 5th ed, and I think so painfully overlooked and underappreciated in vanilla D&D. That's why when we meet newcomers in chat, and these people want to talk about their characters, what's the first question I ask people who are talking about characters? And I've been consistent all these years with this. I don't ask about which weapon he or she is wielding. I don't ask about a favorite magic spell. All right, hero points. Hero points. Yeah, I like those. Man, I'm not getting any royalties from Wizards of the Coast for this. You're welcome, Wizards of the Coast. Hero points work well in epic fantasy and mythic... wait a minute. Have we heard those terms before? Yes, we have. In epic fantasy and mythic campaigns. And those are also referenced in the DMG. We can go back and touch on that. In which the characters are meant to be more like superhero... the superhero fantasy. More like superheroes than the average adventurer is. With this option, a character starts with 5 hero points at first level. Each time the character gains a level, he or she loses any unspent hero points and gains a new total equal to 5 plus half the character's level. A player can spend a hero point whenever he or she makes an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. The player can spend the hero point after the roll is made, but before any of the results, or before its results are applied. Spending the hero point allows the player to roll a d6 and add it to the d20, possibly turning a failure into a success. A player can spend only 1 hero point per roll. Demon Quiller, you are absolutely correct. A lot of people come in and say, "Oh, I play this this dwarf cleric." Well, that's cool. That doesn't tell me much. Tell me your character's background. I want to. What's the background of your character? Let's start there. I get it, dwarf cleric, cool. Set that to the side. What's your character's background? In addition, whenever a character fails a death saving throw, the player can spend 1 hero point to turn the failure into a success. So, big power. This is something that is a lot more like bumper bowling. And look, bowling alleys put down bumpers for a reason. You want the kids, at the party to have fun? Put it down there. If we're talking as adults and we want to be adults in the room, if you as a dungeon master, if you're not running for kids who emotionally might not be able to handle like their character dying or something along those lines, or the kids just want to roll dice and that's really the focus, is more the activity than some, Tolkien-esque grand sweeping epic adventure. You can use this as a dungeon master who loves strategizing and overclocking your encounters. And so you give your players a budget of fungibility. Because you tell them, I am going to kick your butts. We're playing with hero points. I'm going to kick your butts. Use it or not, you got them, but they're there for a reason. And I hope you can step up to the challenges, because by the time we finish this story, you are going to need them and you're going to be the big damn hero. And I'm also going to ask that you describe what happens during the use of these hero points or something along those lines. Yeah, some adults can't handle it either. That's true, DQ. Now, something that Bat Espada didn't know existed. New ability scores, honor, and sanity. Wait, it's not just strength, dex, con? Int, wiz, cha? Now there's Han San? Hansan? If you're running a campaign shaped by a strict code of honor or the constant risk of insanity, consider adding one or both of these new ability scores, honor and sanity. These abilities function like the standard 6 abilities, with exceptions specified in each ability below. Here's how to incorporate these optional abilities at character creation. If your players use the standard array of ability scores, add 111 to the array for each optional ability you add. If your players use the optional point buy system, add 3 points to the number of points for each optional ability you add. If your players roll their ability scores, have them roll for the added ability scores. If you ever need to make a check or saving throw for honor or sanity for a monster that lacks the score, you can use charisma for honor and wisdom for sanity. Now, what is honor? If your campaign involves cultures where a rigid code of honor is a part of daily life, consider using the honor score as a means of measuring a character's devotion to that code. This ability fits well in a setting inspired by Asian cultures, such as Karatur in the Forgotten Realms. The honor ability is also useful in any campaign that revolves around orders of knights. Honor measures not only a character's devotion to a code, but also the character's understanding of it. The honor score can also reflect how the others perceive a character's honor. A character with a high honor usually has a reputation that others know about, especially those who have high honor scores themselves. Unlike other abilities, honor can't be raised with normal ability score increases. Instead, you can award increases to honor or impose reductions based on a character's actions. At the end of an adventure, if you think a character's actions in the adventure reflected well or poorly on his or her understanding of the code, you can increase or decrease the character's honor by 1. As with other ability scores, a character's honor can't exceed 20 or fall below 1. Honor checks can be used in social situations, such as charisma would, when a character's understanding of a code of conduct is the most defining factor in the way a social interaction will play out. You might also call for an honor check when a character is in one of the following situations: being unsure how to act with honor, surrendering while trying to save face, trying to determine another character's honor score, trying to use the proper etiquette in a delicate social situation, using his or her honorable or dishonorable reputation to influence someone else. An honor saving throw comes into play when you want to determine whether a character might inadvertently do something dishonorable. You might call for an honor saving throw in the following situations: avoiding an accidental breach of honor or etiquette, resisting the urge to respond to goading or insults from an enemy, recognizing when an enemy attempts to trick a character into a breach of honor. Now, you might think, that's cool, I like that. I can think of all different societies. Whether it's Occidental knightly orders, it's Oriental societal concepts of conducting yourself with a sense of honor. It could be, or you could take those concepts and twist it a bit and have it be honor among thieves. Honor is measured as in a system of scoundrels in the underworld, because maybe that's where your story takes place, in your world. It's not just the knights who have a code of honor. Or each class has an honor score that can abide, or your actions within that class might make you stronger or weaker. That could be something like a cleric's devotion or a connectivity to a god. Instead of casting off of wisdom, what if you cast off of faith? Now, let's say we keep Dungeons and Dragons 100% vanilla out of the book. You buy it from your friendly local game store. They thank you. You feel good for supporting a small business. You go home, you crack it open, and you say, okay, I get it. And we add this one concept where you cast, as a cleric, you cast off of your faith score or honor score or something along those lines. How does that fundamentally shift the tone of your high magic, high fantasy Dungeons and Dragons game? What does that mean the game will concentrate on or pivot in the direction of? You as the DM would be wanting to do what? This is a mechanic in the game. You don't want people to just forget about it, do you? Well, let's just say that you would impose moral challenges, or you would want to you would be imposing not just moral challenges, you would want to be working with that player to make sure that this person is living a life according to the vows that were taken in order to receive these powers. There would be a greater focus or level of detail on building a world where faith is important. Just like in Arthas, in Dark Sun, the focus isn't on divine magic. There is no religion. There are no gods. The gods are dead. However, there are other things that can be tracked, like blight, or just situational awareness of, oh, someone used arcane magic. That's kind of like an honor score. If you're using it, if you have it, that's indicative of something else. And now we see just changing one little thing. What and what if you, let's go back to vanilla D&D. You took away all spells that can treat disease and poison. Everything else is the same. Now what happens? Disease and poison actually have relevance and meaning again. Those can be compelling story beats. Those can be compelling threats, consequences. Those open up options to actually use spells or poisons, or you grind up the disease beetle and you sprinkle it into an enemy's wine cup. So it's not poison, it's disease. Maybe you still allow it to be detected with magic, but you don't have magic that can... you don't have magic that can cure it. And we'll get to curative magic alterations later, but you can see we're introducing something like honor. Challenge honor, use honor. The game doesn't completely have to hinge around it, but now it's a component of the character to make this character more well-rounded. You could be playing a peasant-style character who has greater honor than the local lord, and despite your lack of wealth, your lack of upbringing, your honor, you might not be as strong, as smart as this lord, but for the fact that your honor is higher than his, your peasant character can find social mobility, credibility, opportunity. You can tell compelling emotional stories using honor. And that doesn't undermine charisma. You can be very charismatic and completely lack honor. Now, I can't think of any examples of real-life people or companies that are very charismatic but are very dishonorable. But, I mean, we're talking about the realm of fantasy, so we'll just pretend that it exists. Bane says, or lesser restoration, or the paladin just use, yeah, or so. That's why it's important to communicate, because someone says, oh, as a paladin, don't worry, I'm going to cure all diseases and everything. I'm going to make them irrelevant in the game. My existence eliminates these things from the game. Delport says, for added shenanigans, replace an existing stat with one of these variants. Characters in your game still have or lack in that disregarded stat. It's just not important in the game. Yeah, if you're playing a wizard and you never use strength, then strength becomes wizardry. You might have a code of magic, or if your magic might be something like muscle. If you're not constantly exercising your magic, it gets weaker. You have to cast your spells every day. And if you don't cast your spells every day, you can't get stronger. Your magic, your wizardry score decreases. As a barbarian, if you're not using your muscles every day, you don't keep your muscles. It just doesn't magically float along. And so if your dump stat is intelligence, and you know you're not going to be doing anything intelligent anyway, then make intelligence your barbarism stat. And are you doing barbary things? Because if you're not, if you're finding peace with the world, you're not working out, you don't have your adrenaline or testosterone or whatever flowing through your body, you're not raising your blood pressure, your body will soften, and you just, maybe you start losing connection with that. You don't rage as much or as effectively. Just as clerics might lose access to powerful spells or spell casting at all. Or the humble peasant can rise above the lord who acts with disgrace. One little thing can alter in beautiful ways this same system that we've been playing. Now, what about sanity? You can make the argument that honor can be the same way. Sanity is interesting because once you quantify something like sanity, you arguably lose the point of sanity. Now, Call of Cthulhu is famous for having a sanity score. And it is baked into the system to challenge it, and that there are very, baked in effects for sanity to exist and be challenged, and to lose it, maybe gain it back. Though you do run into the problem of once you quantify something like sanity, it does lose some of the point of it. Once you give Cthulhu hit points, you don't understand what Cthulhu is. That's a whole other topic for something else. Let's roll with this in concept and understand it's something that can be measured. My statement saying that doesn't make a sanity score existing in D&D bad, though it's a consideration for what happens in your world where sanity is constantly challenged, is frequently butted against, or offers to redeem it come up. Consider using the sanity score if your campaign revolves around entities of an utterly alien and unspeakable nature, such as Great Cthulhu, whose powers and minions can shatter a character's mind. A character with a high sanity is level-headed even in the face of insane circumstances, while a character with a low sanity is unsteady, breaking easily when confronted by eldritch horrors that are beyond normal reason. You might ask characters to make a sanity check in place of an intelligence check to recall lore about the alien creatures of madness featured in your campaign, to decipher the writings of raving lunatics, or to learn spells from tomes of forbidden lore. You might also call for a sanity check when a character tries one of the following activities: deciphering a piece of text written in a language so alien that it threatens to break the character's mind, overcoming the lingering effects of madness, comprehending a piece of alien magic foreign to all normal understanding of magic. Now, in Call of Cthulhu, if you saw a skeleton get up and come towards you, that is cause to have a sanity check. Is that going to happen in D&D? Well, how common is it in your D&D fantasy world for skeletons to do that? If everyone knows necromancy exists, and yeah, skeletons can get up and do that, then a skeleton getting up and do that's not going to challenge sanity. It might be disconcerting, but the impact is going to be different. And so there, you're trying to shift the weight in the abundance of magic. In fact, in Call of Cthulhu, using magic challenges your sanity. You might just, like, sanity is a resource for casting magic. Because the more that you bend reality, that's the price that you pay. You become more unreal. That, in that instance, you might actually use sanity as a fuel source for magic. You want to have high magic, but also high consequences? Or to keep track that people can't just spam fireball all the time? Have it cost sanity to cast magic. Yeah, if your players, if your out-of-character players understand this, and they say, okay, I get it, there's an extra price. I understand magic in the world carries a lot more weight. There aren't many magic users because it breaks people. But I want that challenge. I want to play a caster. I want to play someone who in the world is exceptional, though with high risk is high reward. Well, there you go. The player's onto it. This is a tenet of the world and something around which you can pivot. This is now a focus of the story of this world. And you understand, if you come across someone who uses magic, everyone says this is... Ironically, everyone says this just got real. Because now someone is doing something unreal. Yeah, sanity is less like dexterity, more like hit points. Yeah, it could be that hit point equivalent as well, like a mental hit point pool. But one little thing can re-flavor your entire presentation or shift the tone of your world. Now, what about fear and horror? When adventurers confront threats they have no hope of overcoming, you can call for them to make a wisdom saving throw, or this could be sanity if you're using that, or even honor if they remain resolute in the face of fear. A character who fails the save becomes frightened for a minute. The character can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of his or her turns, ending the effect on the character in a successful save. Horror involves more than simple fright. It entails revulsion and anguish. Often it arises when adventurers see something completely contrary to the common understanding of what can and should occur in the world, or upon the realization of a dreadful truth. In such a situation, you can call on characters to make a charisma saving throw to resist the horror. Set the DC based on the magnitude of the horror circumstances. On a failed save, a character gains a short-term or long-term form of madness that you choose or determine randomly, as determined in Chapter 8. Healing. Now this is an even bigger pressure point for a fantasy game, or really just any kind of theater of the mind, or you're playing on a grid tactical war game. What do you do about what about the problem of healing? The problem of healing? Oh, of course. I fell 200 feet as a barbarian. I raged, so I didn't, I didn't take as much damage, and I also have a pool of 200 hit points. So I fell 200 feet, took 50 points of damage, a quarter of my health, and I just got back up. I got a good night's sleep, and I'm back to 100%. Hit points are weird things, depending on how you treat them. Healing can be a weird thing. These optional rules make it easier or harder for adventurers to recover from injury, either increasing or reducing the amount of time your players can spend adventuring before rest is required. A character can't spend any hit dice after finishing a short rest until someone expends one use of a healer's kit to bandage and treat the character's wounds. That's nice and simple. Now, how many of you ever expend hit dice? Or if you go, you expend hit dice, but we're not going to be fighting for the next couple of days, so you get it back. Or do you have half healing dice recovery the next day? There's a lot of ways to massage or manipulate this. This is, though, making that dependency. There is a consumable. There is a price to pay in some way to have this happen outside of magical means. Healing surges. This optional rule allows characters to heal up in the thick of combat and works well for parties that feature few or no characters with healing magic, or for campaigns in which magical healing is rare. As an action, a character can use a healing surge and spend up to half his or her hit dice. This was something I enjoyed about 4th edition, by the way. Your your healing surges, you only get so many. Your body can only repair itself so much. The magic stimulates it happening, but you can only... Why is my camera out? You can only do it so much in any particular point in time because you're facing exhaustion or you don't have the bodily materials that the magic is just stimulating. So as an action, a character can use a healing surge and spend up to half his or her hit dice. For each hit die spent this way, the player rolls the hit die and adds the character's constitution modifier. The character regains hit points equal to the total. The player can decide to spend an additional hit die after each roll. A character who uses a healing surge can't do so again until he or she finishes a short or long rest. Under this optional rule, a character regains all spent hit dice at the end of a long rest. With a short rest, a character regains hit dice equal to his or her level divided by 4, minimum 1. For a more super heroic feel, you can let a character use a healing surge as a bonus action rather than as an action. Slow natural healing. Characters don't regain hit points at the end of a long rest. Instead, a character can spend hit dice to heal at the end of a long rest, just as with a short rest. This optional rule prolongs the amount of time that characters need to recover from their wounds without the benefits of magical healing and works well for grittier, more realistic campaigns. That's a style that's talked about in the DMG. This can slow things down, and this actually makes combat more dangerous. If you're not the type of person who runs... What is the expectation? 3 or 4 combats a session to balance, hit dice and spells and abilities. This is a point where many DMs are frustrated because they say my party raffle stomps all of my encounters. They blow all of their abilities, and my bosses are nothing but wet tissue paper. Have you run several encounters past them before? Have you taxed their resources any other way? No, but they're 4 level 10 characters, so I'm running a CR 10 boss. Isn't that how it works? Oh, my sweet summer child. If you're not bleeding your player characters, then they will bleed you, because there's an understanding at the table that they save all their resources and dump everything they have into an encounter, whether it's against a goblin cut purse or whether it's against the evil god of evil gods doing evil god stuff evilly and godly. Just putting something like slow natural healing, if you're the type of DM who doesn't often tax resources through frequent encounters or other environmental circumstances or hazards, just using this rule can help with that, so that you don't feel like you are being blown out of the water every time you want to run an encounter. Or that it's an arms race where all of a sudden you have to have CR 20 out of the book monsters to throw at a level 10 party, because they just heal through it all anyway. They just blow all their powers anyway. And with the way action economy works, Holding back in this action economy? Come on. And this can be further modified with rest variants. If you don't want just slow natural healing and or healer's kit dependence. Yeah, GMV says, I throw CR20s at the party in the first session. Epic Heroism. This variant uses a short rest of 5 minutes and a long rest of 1 hour. This change makes combat more routine, so if you want to go the other way, like you want a wartime story, you want everyone to be the big damn hero. You want, if your session doesn't have 10 fireballs cast by the same character, then you ain't playing D&D at my table. Some characters can easily recover from every battle. You might want to make combat encounters more difficult to compensate. Spellcasters using the system can afford to burn through spell slots quickly, especially at higher levels. Consider allowing spellcasters to restore expended spell slots equal to only half their maximum spell slots rounded down at the end of a long rest, and to limit spell slots restored to 5th level or lower. Only a full 8-hour rest will allow a spellcaster to restore a spell slot, all spell slots, and regain spell slots of 6th level and higher. So this is, you could meet in the middle and say, I want you to spend all your low-level stuff. Blow everything up all the time. But I am going to throw big baddies at you. And this is more of a tactical war game we're going through. Which is fine, you can play D&D that way. What about gritty realism? This variant uses a short rest of 8 hours and a long rest of 7 days. This puts the brakes on the campaign, requiring the players to carefully judge the benefits and drawbacks of combat. Characters can't afford to engage in too many battles in a row, and all adventuring requires careful planning. This approach encourages the characters to spend time out of the dungeon. It's a good option for campaigns that emphasize intrigue, politics, and interactions among other NPCs, and in which combat is rare or something to be avoided rather than rushed into. The players at your table might want this style of play, just as we looked at the demographics of players. As part of our consideration of a game, you might understand your friends or family want something more like this. Because all of a sudden, your hit points and spell slots are a lot more scarce. And they mean a whole lot more. You can't just willy-nilly sit down and identify everything, or blow all your spells in a combat. Because then all it takes is a goblin with a rusty knife to come out and you're defenseless for a week. As you're trying to recover from this. Now, if you want to change up the timing, you get the idea. This can still be a lot of fun. If you love resource management or you want to shift the stress of your game in that direction of resource husbandry, of being careful, of not letting everything break down into a fight. If this is causing fun at your table, this is a good way to go about it. Now, this talks about firearms. Another third rail in Dungeons and Dragons. Forget combat wheelchairs. Oh, firearms in my D&D game? I'm going to argue on Twitter all day about this. By the way, I don't argue on that former topic, let alone this latter one. Though these are options. Do you want to be more medieval or do you want to be closer to Renaissance? How much black powder or beyond would you like? Do you want pistols and muskets? Do you want hunting rifles? Or antimatter rifles, for that matter? Well, there you go. Here's some rules for that you can adapt, use as a guideline. What's the difference between an antimatter rifle This is 68 necrotic. What's the difference between this and a magic spell or a scroll or something else? It might be the usability or the accessibility, of course, but think along those lines as well. All right, the next plot points. This is into campaign building. I'm not worried about this part. Initiative variants. These are ways that you can get into battle. This isn't. This can affect a way. It's not necessarily shift the theme of a campaign. This might be more what works mathematically to keep things moving at your table or to make things a bit more interesting. I'm not worried about this. This is more mechanical. I guess not that the others weren't mechanical, but the other things affect the story, the genre or subgenre of your game. There's a lot of other things about climbing onto a bigger creature, disarming, mark a target, which was something in 4th edition, for example. Lingering injuries would go up to healing. You can read about those here. A lot of extra actions. Now, why aren't these in the core book? This seems like a straightforward thing. You know, shove aside. With this option, a creature uses the special shove attack from the player's handbook to force a target to the side rather than away. The attacker has disadvantage on its strength check when it does so. If that check is successful, the attacker moves the target 5 feet to a different space within reach. Not just away, but into the grinder or something, right? It's a little bit more complicated, a little bit more strategy. You can use it, and it's here in a core rulebook. You don't have to, but it's something you can adopt if you want more strategy. Or you don't want to overrun a new player with a rule like overrun, or have a lot of extra options or conditions to memorize. If they can be hand waved or simulated through other means. This is stuff though. Cleaving through creatures. This is great stuff to consider to spice up the way that you present your world. You know, cleaving through creatures, this can be a tonal shift into something that's a lot more brutal. And remember, if you can use it as a player, your DM will probably use it against you as well. So injuries, massive damage, system shock, morale. These are good things to also read up on. Review them. See if this is appropriate. If you go with lingering injuries and slower healing, you are going to tend towards a less of a high fantasy. This is low fantasy, historical fantasy, grimdark, where we're worried about disease and poison and injury and madness, and these things that are less noblebright. The horizon isn't as golden in these types of games, where you are more of a bloody mess more often, and you don't get to clean up as quickly. But that's part of the fun. That's part of the grit. Sometimes getting down and dirty, playing in the mud, is a lot of fun. And that's your escapism. You want to tussle. You want to throw everything you have at something to vent your frustrations in real life or whatever. These are the ways to tweak the game. And it could even happen, this could even happen mid-game. Again, I would not do it punitively or without some reason that's not communicated. But suddenly, if your game starts out very vanilla, out of the book D&D, well, something happens and you remove one of the two bumpers in the lanes. Yeah, you could still get a gutter ball. It's not as frequent, so things get a little tougher. And maybe that's because they move out of this area where healing and magic, it happened, it was intrinsic because of whatever. Now they're outside of their comfortable magical lands. You know, they're not in Kakariko. No, not Kakariko. Whatever the village is in Ocarina of Time where the fairy people lived. You go out into Hyrule, you know, real life. There's a lot more danger that's there. Recovery is a lot more earned. You got to kill monsters in order to get your own life back, right? So, in this case, maybe you're building this world where there is a place that's a lot more regenerative and restorative. They leave that, and you impose one of these healing rules. One of the 2 bumpers is removed. Then things get serious as we find out the magic of the world is fading or altering, or there's just a curse on the land that supersedes what the rules were before, and now things are getting more interesting. The rules are increasing in difficulty as the adventure is. It's not just a matter of scaling numbers, challenge rating to the level of the party. Now, as enemies are getting smarter about you as your character, you as your party, or just in general, you're facing tougher monsters than little blue happy slimes that are near your quaint farming village in the Magic Lands. From this point forward in the game, you introduce an initiative score, or another a different way that actually causes the natural twitchiness of the players to stop always being first in initiative, or that you encourage strategy. You as the GM, DMST, know I'm going to be flopping my initiative between every round. My goblins are now smart, and they're going to attack very intelligently. And so I'm going to open the system up, and if the players don't use it, well, they've been forewarned and they agreed to it. But my goblins are going to be going first, going last, going in the middle, doing all this other stuff. Because now the stakes are higher. The world is a little bit more grim or dark. Or things are just getting real from Fantasyland, Farming Village, Magic Elf World into some greater, very existential threat. Because what's happening now out in this tough real world where boo-boos hurt and you can actually get poisoned or diseased, well, that adds weight and consequence, pressure, and a ton of fun a little bit at a time. You don't have to load up on these the whole way. By the way, some of this are also throwback to older editions. I mean, I pointed out some 4th edition stuff. Speed factor by what the weapon or the attack you're making. Spell casting, subtract the spell's level. Melee heavy, melee lighter finesse, blah blah blah. Creature size. If you like doing math and minutia, add these instead. Anyway, I think I've made my point here. Now we're getting into creating and modifying monsters and spells and races and sub-races and all this other stuff. I've laid the groundwork for the overarching point now of in our world that's going to come up. And I'm going to want your help now that we've covered stuff like this. I want to know what type of a world we should make in our workshops to come. Delport says, I do really like the idea of unfolding mechanics over the course of a campaign. Almost the way RTS games introduce unit resources. Exactly, Delport, yes. And it's not just a scaling of the math. Because if everything scales, then it really just comes down to, did I roll 12 or greater? Because you know it's the floating number. At first level, at 20th level, did you roll a 12 or greater? That's all you're really determining. Maybe you crit or something. And if that's the case, then it's actually just, you're getting more options, but the nothing necessarily increases. But if you treat it like a tech tree, if you treat it like an RTS game, and especially if it's not punitive You're using it to build your story. You have struck gold, and you are offering a unique world and a unique set of circumstances and something memorable to offer your players. That's not just another D&D game where every spell is available, all the classes are the same, all the builds are the same, because everything is the same, because no one wants to run anything other than vanilla D&D. Now, I get the simplicity. I'm not bemoaning laziness. Kids these days have attention deficit disorder, and kids these days are lazy, and kids these days and blah, blah, blah. It's nothing like that. I don't like playing accounting mini games. There are some things that I don't mind accounting for. I don't want the minutia. I'm fine with not having super gritty realism where I'm tracking every little thing. How many days of water? How many days of food? How many, whatever, right? And if not the minutia, then grander things like in my games that I run, I do not allow comeback to life spells. The exception was revivify because the person might not be dead yet, and that's treated like a defibrillator. Or CPR. It's magical CPR. Which can bring people back. But if you introduce mechanics and spells, especially in a hard magic system, spells are nothing more than a tool like a defibrillator or a technique like CPR, and someone can die and come back and that's it. It cheapens life. Life is only worth... Hang on a second. We're going to look this up. In vanilla Dungeons and Dragons, I'll tell you how much a life is worth. Life is only worth 500 gold pieces. Or a diamond. Well, a diamond worth 500 gold. However you measure that out. Now, how scarce are diamonds in your world? Maybe diamonds just don't exist. Except the one that's in a museum behind, you know. And so any one person could come back to life with this one diamond. And that's it. But in this case... in vanilla, out-of-the-book Dungeons & Dragons, at any point in time, you are only ever worth 500 gold. That's it. That's cheap. I just need a diamond that I can bring someone back to life? Huh. Alright. And this is a hard magic system, so we know all the components, we know everything it takes. This is it's 5th level. It's a 5th level spell. You return a dead creature you touch to life, provided it has been dead no longer than 10 days. If the creature's soul is both willing and at liberty to rejoin the body, the creature returns to life with 1 hit point. This spell also neutralizes any poisons and cures non-magical diseases that affected the creature at the time it died. This spell doesn't, however, remove magical diseases, curses, or similar effects. If these aren't first removed prior to casting the spell, they take effect when the creature returns to life. The spell can't return an undead creature to life. This spell closes all mortal wounds, but it doesn't restore missing body parts. If the creature is lacking body parts or organs integral for its survival, its head for instance, the spell automatically fails. Coming back from the dead is an ordeal. The target takes a -4 penalty to all attack rolls, saving throws, and ability checks. Every time the target finishes a long rest, the penalty is reduced by 1 until it disappears. So there you go. 500 gold, slap a diamond in the person's mouth, have them chew it up nice and fine. They get a little summoning sickness, and boom, you're back to life. What does this mean? What does this mean in your world? and this is going to be the topic of our next part too, so hold on for that. But in vanilla D&D, at any point in time, you're only ever worth 500 gold pieces. Although, I'm curious. I'm curious. Oh, yeah. Yeah, plate mail's 1,500. But a human life is only 500. 3 for 1. Life is cheap, everyone. Buy. Hey, Xbox Aaron, thank you. Thank you very much. Life is cheap, 3 for 1. You could buy 3 lives for the cost of 1 suit of plate mail. How awesome is that? So then, like as Demon Cooler said, I imagine if a DM restricted diamond access too much to players by circumstance, all of the wealthiest aristocrats have already mined and hoarded them. Yep. Now that could make for some interesting heists, or it means, well, you know what? We'll get to that in the upcoming part. So hold on to that idea, okay? Hold on to it. We're going to talk about this stuff and things that you can adjust from beyond the grave, no, from beyond the DMG and beyond the player's handbook. So, I'll be right back. Let's get up and stretch, everyone.